just do the recording uh, because there may be other people who want to join us and see this after the fact. So we'll assume that that's the case. Hey, everybody. I can't believe it. Can't believe we're at our final session for the year. It's been a fabulous journey. I have a little bit to think aloud with you about regarding Shavuot. And then it's going to go into an open format. So a couple of words about Shavuot and what it is that sits around you at the moment. So we've reached this day. In a few minutes, we'll count the. I mean, we're not going to, but if we could count the 50th day of the Omer, which means that 38 or so hundred years ago, our ancestors stood at the base of Mount Sinai tonight. And Moses stood up at the top, and something happened, and he came down a changed man, and we were a changed people from there on. So this is the kind of the in some ways the epicenter of our Jewish narrative. Up until that moment, we were a ragtag group of people. That moment changed us into a nation with a sense of purpose, and since then we've been executing on that in better or worse ways. So there are a couple traditions that go along with Shavuot. One is called a tikkun. And you know the word from tikkun olam, but the word here, tikkun, is in the sense of realigning ourselves. So the tradition would be that starting with sundown and the lighting of festival candles, that people would begin learning. And since we're celebrating the receipt of Torah, and Torah writ large is the sense of just learning in general, there would be shiurim, lessons that go on all night long. And in bigger communities, there may be 3 or 4 choices that are happening all around the building, and people are going for 1 hour classes back to back, and then you pause for a while in the middle, and you all dance at 2 a.m. and then you go back to class, and then you stop again at 4 a.m. and have some more coffee, and then you go back to class, and then somewhere around 5 a.m. around sunrise, the community comes back together and davens shachrit, the morning blessings, and sometimes they get the timing just right, so they're saying Shema as the sun just breaks the horizon. So it's quite a dramatic celebration of the festival. And then along with the behaviors I just told you, like many of our festivals, we have some food attached. And if you could think of one, I don't want to make you say the wrong answer. All right, I'm just going to say, so people may think of cheesecake as the cornerstone of Shavuot food, but there's actually a better representation. That's it. Blintzes. I wasn't sure if you'd say that right off the bat if I simply said, what is the quintessential food? Blintzes. Because, anyone know? Why dairy? We've got cheesecake, blintzes. We're going to have rugelach that has dairy in it, cheese in it. What's with the dairy?
Right.
No, that's a good thought, though.
Identified as an point.
No, not really. I mean, at that moment, theoretically, we received the rules around kashrut with the Torah, with the delivery of Torah. So, it does say don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, but no, we didn't have a system of kashrut yet. Because the Torah, or the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life, is thought of as sustaining of a person's life. And what more sustaining substance is there than milk? A mother's milk is that which gives life to the young and sustains them through their vulnerability. And so in the same sense that eating flesh, meat, is associated with death, and its counterpart, milk, is associated with life. It's again one of those elements where, and this isn't in the pshat, this isn't the strict textual obvious understanding, but the rabbis saw that there were a lot of separations. The Torah likes to make distinctions. And so another one of them was that not mixing milk and meat is about taking these two symbols of opposite energies, death and life, and keeping them separate. So on the festival, when we're celebrating the gift of something which has kept us alive and vibrant for all this time, they associated it with eating dairy. And why blintzes of all forms of dairy?
Don't know what a pince is.
Oh, it's like a little burrito, like an egg crepe wrapped around sometimes fruit filling or cheese filling. Say
I
it.
didn't have ovens.
No.
The outside of the lens and the wheat that was,
You were headed in the right direction, then you veered off course. It's because they look like little Torahs.
oh,
So in the absence of blintzes, these little rugula are so cute. They're like little
They look like-
scrolls. So I'm excited. This is perfect. Thank you. So the blessing that I'm going to do is bore mine mizonot. A mazon is a type of food, but it's usually a baked good. So if it's not bread, but it's like a cookie or a muffin or a little cake of some sort, it's bore mine. Mine is types. So the creator of different types of baked things. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei mizonot. Okay.
That's something I can make it in the form of little toy.
It's like, looks like you're rolling them out.
If you've ever seen Cantor Micah roll a scroll, that's delicious. Oh, yeah, that's right. I can edit that out. These are delicious.
Not chocolate or mine.
I also brought some celebratory drink. We've got a red wine, a white wine, and a sparkling lemonade, I think, to celebrate the culmination of a year. So it seems silly to wait until the end of the class to do so when you can sit with them. Yeah, exactly right. And when we won't have time to enjoy it. So so please, if you're so inclined as I am to pour yourself something to drink, that would be just great. Dennis, if you wouldn't mind, I'll take out some red.
So I read something, I think it was, like it was,
Mhm.
question was why to study all night, and I think the answer was that when Torah-
Red.
when Torah weren't there, so to recommend that
Thank you.
they study all.
When Torah was given, the Jewish people weren't there. Huh. I'd have to take a look at that because that doesn't track with even the shot reading in the Torah. So I wonder, I do like the idea that the learning is repentance for something. Thank you so much. And that it, I mean, because that is something that a lot of meaning is associated with learning. And so we often will align learning with memory. So when a loved one dies, sometimes we'll learn a whole tractate of Mishnah in their honor. And yeah, so repenting, that makes sense. I'm not sure about the piece with their absence at the giving, but I'm interested. So what else can I tell you about Shavuot? Anything?
Anybody here?
Well, I think we should. Anyone else want something to drink?
Red's white. Red bottle looks like red. Yes, right.
And there's another bottle out there too. At Sinai, we've all got one.
It's
Yes, yep. It's one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. And I was reading Art Green today, who was saying that he felt like Shavuot should be like the centerpiece of the Jewish year. That Passover is about preparation for the receiving of Torah. You can't accept Torah if you're still in bondage. So Passover is preparatory to Shavuot. Sukkot is on the other end of the year. It's part of the expression of the rituals that come from the tradition in the Torah. So you needed Torah to get that. And while it's not really talked about this way in other Jewish sources, you could easily see Shavuot as the pinnacle of the Jewish year.
Spring, considered the spring harvest also.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, Christians call it Pentecost, which has to do with the harvest in some way as well. Yes.
Well, the wheat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim is right. So this is intended as an open forum conversation. I wonder if, Allison, if you scooted back 6 inches and Sadai, yeah, perfect. Okay, Elizabeth, you did it. You did it. There we go. Now I can see everyone. Now I feel like we're all in it together. Yeah, there's no one up there. It's just us. But I thought I'd record it for anyone who wants to watch afterwards. Tonight we have nobody online.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a totally new thing.
Yeah. And poor Marty Ann, she when I get an email from Zoom when someone tries to get onto the meeting that I have scheduled. So yesterday at 7 p.m., I got like 16 emails saying Marty Ann is trying to join your meeting. And she wrote to me saying, "No, I can't get to the meeting." And I said, "No, it's tomorrow." But I thought she'd join us tonight. So the hope here would be that in the time we have tonight, you would bring to the table questions, observations, things that you want to challenge, anything that has stuck with you over the course of our time together, or other things that you've thought about as our time has rolled along that didn't fit in anywhere else, or something that you've just never had a chance to ask out loud, but have always been meaning to. And if you fall short on this, I will just start talking. Believe me, I can fill the time. So, would anybody like to get us off the ground with a question? Okay, so can I tell them what your second question was? So James sent a question this morning about Ruth's marriage to Boaz. Each festival has a different book that's associated with it and that gets read as part of the lectionary cycle. So in synagogues tomorrow, they'll read the book of Ruth. And so, not Ruth, Naomi, excuse me. So Naomi is Ruth's daughter-in-law. She's married to Ruth's son, and Ruth's husband and son die, and she decides, I'm going home to my ancestral land, and says to Naomi, the Moabite, you're free. You know, you don't have to come with me. You did your duty, go back to your family, get a new marriage, you know, you're released. And she says, I don't want to go back to my family. And then she has this famous line, wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you dwell, I'll dwell. Your people, they'll be my people. And your God will be my God. It's this beautiful statement of acceptance. And, it's become the quintessential line for conversion into Judaism. So when they get to the promised land, they meet Boaz, a wealthy landowner, and they fall upon his good graces. And he allows these two widows, one older and one younger, to remain in his field. And it's a very dramatic, beautiful interaction. He's kind. These two women are in the class of the most vulnerable. They have no relationships there. They have no male to protect them. They have no camp to live in. So they show up on this stranger's doorstep, and he's beneficent and generous. Ultimately, Naomi ends up marrying Ruth. Do I have it backwards? Ruth. Yeah, thank you. Ruth ends up marrying Naomi. Naomi is the mother-in-law. Thank you.
One of them marries Boaz. They don't marry each other.
They don't marry each other.
What did I say? And I had like this. Okay. Let me try that again.
That's it.
It was very. Ruth marries Boaz. And Jane's question was, is this the first Levirate marriage? And my answer was no,
What's the term, levirate?
Levirate marriage.
What does that mean?
So there is a rule in the Torah that if a woman marries a man and he dies before she can have a child, he dies childless. There's no legacy, there's no name to carry on his family. So his younger brother has to marry the widow, the wife of his older brother. And then when he has kids, that first son is not his own. It is actually thought of as his dead brother's son. I'm sorry. And for that reason, many men would not want to perform this ritual because it removes from themselves a degree of inheritance of the family bequest.
In the story of Ruth and Naomi, it sort of infers that Boaz is the nearest relative that they have protecting them, which is why I asked the question.
So because it wasn't her younger brother-in-law, it didn't qualify as levirate. There's a bizarre ceremony that is described to take place if the younger brother doesn't want to do that role, doesn't want to fulfill the duty of marrying his sister-in-law. It's called chalitza. And I don't remember all the details, but he goes to the center of town and he takes off his sandal, I believe, and says, I don't want to perform this ritual. And I think she spits in his face. And it's this like really dramatic shaming of him for not following on the filial responsibility of continuing the family line. And so Boaz not being the younger brother didn't fit that role. And no, that was not.
Have to be married, unmarried,
Yeah, that's the younger.
Unmarried.
Correct.
So what happens if there is no other brothers, like, then she just,
So if there's no other brother or there's no one available, then it's just a tragedy. But she's basically been purchased into that family. A young bride leaves her parents' tent and moves into the camp of her husband. So now he is of the family and deserves a son. And so if the first husband didn't provide it, then the family sort of has the responsibility of continuing that. The story of Judah and Tamar, that's a story of levirate marriage, where she married Judah's oldest son, and I can't remember the names, they were weird names, like I think. And he died without giving her a child. And she married the second brother, and he died without giving her a child. And the third brother then was withheld. And Judah didn't want to give his third son to Tamar because she's apparently a killer. And what ends up happening is a fascinating, dramatic telling of this narrative. So she waits and waits and waits. He's owed this third brother, or third son. And one day, realizing that her father-in-law, Judah, is not going to fulfill his responsibility, she goes to the crossroads where prostitutes will typically sit, and she engages Judah on the way home from someplace. And after they're done, he has nothing to pay her with. And so she says, give me your staff and your ring, and I think your walking stick as well, as what do you call it? Collateral. And you can come back and pay me tomorrow. So she disappears from the crossroads. And when Judah comes back the next day to pay, he asks around, where's that harlot that was here yesterday? And they said, there's no harlot here. So Tamar gets pregnant. And this is a shanda, because she is she's sort of an unmarried maiden, but she's also sort of promised to this family. And if she got pregnant, it means that she stepped out on the family, and she's brought on trial and will be put to death for this, except that she produces the staff and the ring and the sash. And she says, the man who owns these is responsible for my pregnancy. And Judah's mortified. Suddenly in public, it's just become known that he is the father of this pregnancy. And Judah says beautifully, she is more right than I, and pulls back the charges. He rightfully needed to give her to his youngest son and shirked the duty, and it's quite a dramatic example of levirate marriage.
Did he not recognize her?
No, she was dressed in the clothes of a harlot and wore the veil, and we know from Jacob marrying Leah when it was supposed to be Rachel that it's apparently pretty easy to not only stand under the chuppah with the wrong lady, but then to spend the night with her too. And
Isn't it easy? Picking up the veil?
exactly, that's why we do the deck-in and check to make sure that this is the person that I plan to marry.
Since you've only seen them probably twice in your life, it's not really a great check.
Well, right, even in our ceremonies, we do it. Julie wore a veil, and so I did the deck-in. Most of our veils, for those who do wear, which is very unusual now, are see-through. Some women are wearing them up the whole time. So what I do in my ceremonies instead is we do a spiritual deck-in. So I have the couple stand together face to face, and everyone else kind of lowers their eyes, and I invite them to just look into the eyes of their partner and to remind themselves that this is the soul that you have chosen to spend the rest of your days with, and we just allow some quiet moment of beauty and connection. And it's not yet.
Look at each other. Not exactly what I anticipated.
No, not the upstanding before they.
Right.
The sister of his wife, if his wife dies, have anything to do with?
No, that has more to do with the fact that the two families have created a relationship. In traditional circles, when families are matched, the machatonim become quite close. And so if you already know the family and you've determined they're a good family, that has a lot to do with the family's good name. So if there's another daughter, that could happen. Sometimes even, like the younger brother will marry the younger sister for the same kind of reason. It's convenient. What else would you like to talk about? Yes.
I guess my question always, and I think it's something I transmitted to you, is the word of spirituality. I stumble over all the time. Yeah. I find it very hard personally to understand what that really means in the religious context. And
I will.
so I'm just curious what conversation.
Yeah. I can talk about that all night. I did some good crunching of the results of our survey, the spirituality survey, or the belief survey, and I'll be doing some presentations on it in the next couple of weeks. One of the questions was, would you consider yourself spiritual? And a lot of people said yes. A lot of people said, I don't know what that means.
That was me.
You were in very good company. A lot of people didn't know what to do with the word. And I think a lot about Mike, who's really brave. I was speaking about you this morning. I'm so impressed that Mike, who was a self-avowed dismisser of the wooiness of spirituality. Not your words, but rolled your eyes and thought of it as, that just speaks about people who do things outside their own best interest, and not a positive starting point. And yet you stuck with it and continue to gnaw on it. And I love watching the process for you. I think that it's a great example of a word that has been saddled with a lot of baggage, thanks to everything from Eastern spiritualities and Christian spiritualities to things like the hippie movements of the 1960s, through all kinds of polemics against it in a modern moment of rationality, which I think we've moved past as a society. So spirituality, what is it? I'm going to throw some stuff out there and let's talk about it. And so if you wouldn't mind, just on that thermostat up on the wall, there's one big button on the lower right corner. Other right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The idea of spirituality, I think, is the desire to be present in a moment, to be fully engaged in what's happening. And we have lots of techniques to do that. And I think people often box spirituality too narrowly into the realm of religion, and sometimes further than that into the location of synagogue or where prayer is happening. I think that they often have a preconceived image of what a spiritual person looks like or sounds like or acts like. And so it's easy, just like in the conversation about God, it's very easy for people to rely on preconceived, pre-established baselines. And if it doesn't match them, and it usually doesn't, then they're more likely to say, I don't know about spirituality. But I think that everybody understands what a spiritual moment is. So anybody who's had one of those aha moments where time stopped just for a split second, where looking back, you realize that was a powerful moment. It's those birth of my child moments, or those mountaintop moments, or the floating in the ocean moments, the near-death moments, moments where all the other awarenesses are pulled away and you are pure consciousness. That's spirituality. And so anything else then that becomes a practice that can pull you closer to facilitating more of those would be part of the spirituality community. So for some people it's prayer, but according to our survey, not most. For some people, again, it's things like doing art or writing poetry or engaging in beauty making, physical activity, skiing, yoga, whatever. Those things that pull a person into the moment and where they leave feeling really refreshed and alive for that, having had that moment. You come down off the ski slopes after a great day and you think, I'm going to remember this day. This was a day that I lived, that I really lived. And you feel good. You feel fresh. You feel ready for the world. That's a spirituality.
I've always, in my mind's eye, I've always separated the material from the thought process. So, whether I'm skiing or not skiing is, to me, is an irrelevancy. It's really what's going on in my headset, not the fact that I can replicate it by again going on the ski slope or having another child, for instance, where that is the case. But it's strictly a mental activity.
Yeah.
And it's, to my mind, it's been co-opted by religion and other things as
Yeah.
well. So that, they've taken, well, if you want to have a spiritual life or having a spiritual experience, you must do X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
according to my example.
Correct. I think that's exactly right. But I would also say that I think I differentiated in this group once before between what I call brain and mind. So your brain is your functional day-to-day activities, lifting my hand to my mouth, kind of, I don't know, my nose itches, those, that's the brain. The mind is the higher level consciousness and awareness. So what we need to do is quiet the brain. And there are all kinds of techniques to do that. Grating a beautiful sourdough, or I guess you don't grate sourdough, but you know what I mean. That could
When
be
it comes out great, it's a spiritual experience.
Yeah, right. In that moment where you take the first good deep smell of it, or you rip it open and the steam rises, those are moments where your brain has just quieted down. If I told you, Dennis, I want you to go home and make a sourdough and then rip it open, and I want you to have a big moment when the steam comes rising, probably wouldn't work, because your brain is active saying, okay, now I'm supposed to rip it open and the steam's going to come out and then I'm going to have a big moment. Well, that's not going to happen. So those instruction manuals for getting to that spot have worked for many people at times in history and have been recreated for us along the way. So when someone who's a meditation teacher says to you, sit comfortably, close your eyes, deep breathing, focus on your chest. Like all of those are mechanisms. Try and quiet down the brain so that you can be mentally really present. So everything you said is exactly right. And for some people, prayer is that step, those set of steps that get them to that space.
Talk a little bit about Kabbalah and its relationship. I know nothing about it and its relationship to the path of oneness.
Yeah. So Barbara's asking about Kabbalah and its relationship to mysticism and a path to oneness. So here's what I'll say. Did anybody read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now?
Yes.
He's a modern philosopher. He wrote a great book about being in the present, being now. Humans are really bad at it, where we spend 99% of our time in the past and the future, but not very much time in the moment. Nothing revolutionary in his book. He just said it in a really palatable way, digestible way. It was a clever, easily accessible book that went viral if books could go viral, and was a bestseller. And I loved it. It's a great book. You should read it. So Isaac Luria, Abraham Abulafia, Moshe Cordovero, these guys were the Eckhart Tolle of the 1500s. They were, just like others, seeking a presentation of spirituality in a new way that would make sense to readers. So what they decided to present it with is a model that helps visualize what's happening here. But at its core, there's still something important to connect with. And the idea here is that God is an all-encompassing energy. There's the one. We are a part of the energy, and yet we break ourselves off from it. We experience ourselves as something in the energy, but not of the energy. So how does this little spark that's us connect with the whole? We would be blown away. Our minds would turn to jelly if we were shown God in God's fullness. So Isaac Luria especially comes up with a diagram that we call the spherot. So you've seen the 10 circles in a kind of a pattern coming down. And the idea here is, and I may have said a little of this already. Did I talk about the transformer? Okay, so these circles are stops along the way of God's energy moving from something that's unrelatable because of its power down to something that we can understand and connect with. So Kabbalah it's a school of thought that seeks to describe how a human can access energy and truth that is generally beyond our availability. And for some, like Eckhart Tolle, it was magical, perfect. It made so much sense. For others, like me, it makes very little sense, or I find it inaccessible at least. So Chassidut, the Hasidic tradition is actually it's a few centuries younger than Kabbalah, but it's in many ways very similar. It just comes at the goal from a completely different angle, and it makes experiential sense to me. I don't need to be convinced of something in Chassidut. I have experienced the truths of Chassidut, and so it's much more available to me. Kabbalah, to me, was always overly descriptive of things that you had to kind of imagine, and I didn't get a lot out of the imagination of it.
You also have to be of a certain age in order to be able to study it.
Yeah. It was the real secrets of Kabbalah were only taught to men who were over the age of 40 and who were married. Yeah. Right.
Questionnaire that we did, was that 100% created here, or many other synagogues
No, that was
affiliated with HBC doing something similar, so you'd be able to compare
No.
results to others.
Sorry, that was me, all me. Yeah. Recently, coincidentally, another rabbi did it at a much larger synagogue. And by the way, didn't get that many more respondents than I did.
How many responses?
Go Sinai, we got 208. Which is great, it's great. And I had several people who reached out after the survey was closed, once I needed to start working on the data, saying, oh, I tried to submit and it says it's closed, is it too late? And the answer was, yep. Yep, sorry. The other survey wasn't nearly as well crafted as mine was. And
Your
so,
survey went down to David Lyon in Houston. Who's a large rabbi there, through someone I know who.
Oh.
That synagogue, and I said, are you guys doing anything? I was just curious, you
Oh.
guys do anything like that?
yeah,
And they said, no, something, yeah, they're doing surveys on spirituality, but nowhere near that. And I didn't know, but nowhere near as robust or
oh, I like
lengthy or
David
whatever.
Lyon. Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting was,
So a lot of rabbis obviously are, it's not just us that are swimming in the wilderness trying to figure this out.
this has happened to me a number of times in the last couple of years, that in the quiet of my own brain, I'm working on something, and then surprise, surprise, I find out my colleagues are asking the same questions, working on the same things. So it's not a shock to me. I've been thinking about doing this for a couple of years, but it's not a shock to me that others are thinking it too.
But you're questioning basically the foundation that's been driving at least our practice for centuries. And you told us that Guide to the Perplexed was a classic text that tried to really allow Jews to literally question some of this stuff. But is there anything else in our last 3,500 years where a robust questioning of the, existence of God?
No.
Right.
No, that
Because
would,
it kind of undermines the whole sociology of a group built upon that belief.
the only thing that comes to mind in response to your question would be something like Spinoza. And if Spinoza hadn't been so powerfully known to the non-Jewish world, then when he was excommunicated by the Jewish world for his radical beliefs, which didn't question God exactly, but completely rewrote the notion of God, he would have been cut out from our canon and we never would have seen his literature. So if there were people along the way who wrestled with this stuff, we certainly didn't see it. Oh, you know what? Another example comes to mind is from As a Driven Leaf. It's a book that the congregation read a few years ago. Milton Steinberg's historical novel about the rabbis of the Talmud. Really a cool book. But it takes 4 historical rabbis and populates their character with real people and fills in all the blanks. And there we have Elisha ben Abuya, who is one of the rabbis of the Talmud, who went through a crisis of faith and became an apostate and cut ties with the Jewish community and ran off to Rome. So, I mean, we have a story there of somebody who said, I can't believe in God anymore. Maybe, I guess, the more I think about it, the more I kind of, I'm sure. I wanted to actually read something real quickly if you'd allow me. Actually, whether or not you allow me, I'm reading it.
I look at it.
So what I'm reading from is from Art Green's book called Judaism for the World. And he has a lot of different cool little chapters and then chapters for each holiday. So this is from the chapter on Shavuot. So I was learning it just earlier today. And so he's acknowledging how hard is the concept of God as delivered to us by our parents or our childhood rabbi or our simple absorption of pop Judeo-Christian culture. The God that is of the Bible is a really foreign concept to us experientially. Intellectually, we know all about that God, but experientially, so Art Green's discussing that a little bit. He says, can we imagine a God so arbitrary as to choose one nation, one place, and one moment in human history in which the eternal divine will was to be manifest for all time? I'm skipping a little bit. How outrageous is it for us to insist that we alone stood there at the mountain and thus continue to stand at the center of human history for all time? You know, what he's railing against here is modern particularism. You know, it doesn't work for most people anymore to say that, you know, some person in the middle of Azerbaijan has no stake or awareness in God's radar screen. Just me, because I'm an Israelite and I am a descendant of those guys. You know, he's setting up permission to say that's absurd, or at least it's in contrast to my value set.
Rabbi, weren't we told or whatever, led to believe that no one else wanted the Torah, that it was offered to others and nobody accepted it? Is that true?
It is absolutely true and not at all accurate. I mean, what does that even mean, really? Your starting assumption is that God, in fact, gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai tonight. You know, anniversary. Most people aren't even comfortable with that model in its literal delivery. So if you can get comfortable with that model, then where's the proof that it was delivered to all these other people first and they all said no? The proof text for that is in Exodus, I think, where they say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do it. Yes, God, we'll do it. What is it? And the rabbis take that and they riff on a story. All the other peoples said, what's in the Torah? No, we don't want it. The Israelites said, yes, we want it. What's in it? It was a show of faith and humility. Similarly, we tell stories about Mount Sinai. It was the smallest of the mountains. All the other mountains had way too much ego to be the one to chosen for Mount Sinai. So God chose Mount Sinai because of its humility. We are like Mount Sinai. We're small people. We're humble. I don't know if that's true, but we're humble. We are the humblest. Yeah. And let me tell you about our human. It's one of our best qualities. You see what I did there, right? So the story that you're bringing, Connie, is it's part of our master narrative in the way that Betsy was talking about them. Though I think that's no longer PC to say. It's part of our foundational story. And so it's true in the sense that it's how we've told ourselves about ourselves for a long time. But stories don't always maintain their staying power. So, I don't know, think about, I don't know what's popped in my mind, but think about Little Red Riding Hood. And I know you saw me take a jump there. Stick with me.
I'm not going anywhere.
Think about the ending of Little Red Riding Hood, right? It has evolved over the last several decades. What's the original ending of Little Red Riding Hood?
Everybody dies. It's
Yeah,
It's the end and then
the wolf eats grandma.
Somebody's.
and then the woodsman comes and shoves.
That I believe is the second evolution, where the woodsman comes and slices open the wolf and pulls Granny out alive.
That's what happens in Into the Woods.
That's the slightly gentler version. Before that, it had something to do with jamming boulders down the mouth of the wolf so that the wolf couldn't move. Something like that, yeah. So then Granny comes out alive, she's fine, but the wolf, oh my God. And then the version we read to my children was that the woodchopper comes along and grabs the wolf and turns him upside down and kicks him until Granny falls out. And boy, is she mad. So stories don't maintain their same telling all the way along. So we've told the story about how all the other people were given Torah first and they said no, so they deserve what they get, basically. To this moment, where much of the modern Jewish world is uncomfortable with the particularism of being God's chosen people. So we do all kinds of back bends to try to deal with the notion of being chosen, because we don't want to give up that word, and yet we don't want to be sitting next to our friend who's not Jewish and say, I'm the chosen one, sorry. I look ready to ask for that.
Yes.
Yes.
So what do you think would happen if you told that same thing to your T-home group about how nobody wanted it, but we took it without asking? Think that they wouldn't think that, they would probably, the teenagers would say that was really dumb, not asking,
I don't think they get that far, Jane.
you know.
I think once they started hearing the rabbi talk about God talking to the people and the people, and that every people on the earth, they would tune out. They would say, oh, we're going into fairy tale mode. And I think I'd lose them really quickly. Sadai first. Didn't you have your hand up a minute ago? You didn't. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I will ask you the question that was buried at the heart of what I sent you, which is that once you accept the notion that there is no supreme meaning that punishment you will reward you for behavior, how do you reinforce a religion that's based on ritual, where there is no monitoring your behavior?
Did everybody understand Mike's question?
There's no consequence.
There's no consequence. There's no fights that shoot like.
There's no divine consequence.
Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, that's.
I mean,
So let me just back up to make sure that everyone sees how we're getting there. So Mike is latching on to the traditional narrative, and that is God gave us Torah. Torah says you have to do this, so you have to do this. If you don't do this, God, who told you what you're supposed to do, has every ground to punish you. Now, if you don't believe in that supernatural, and just remember the etymology of that is important. You've got nature, and something above and beyond nature would be supernatural. So if you don't believe in a being who is out there and watching and thinking and existing and doing and whatever, listening and speaking and whatever else the tradition says God does, if that doesn't speak to you, and let me put a pin in that because I want to come back to it in a moment. If you don't buy into that, then you don't buy into Torah being given at Mount Sinai. And if you don't buy into that, you don't buy into all the tradition for the last couple thousand years that has led to the behaviors that are established today. By the way, you're describing Reform Judaism. Reform Judaism at its core doesn't buy into the supernatural deity who delivered Torah in its completion, leading to all this other stuff. So Mike's.
Yeah, to refine it, if you don't believe in supernatural being, why would anybody follow the costume? Why would anybody fast on Yom Kippur? Why would anybody refrain from having a cheeseburger?
But in Christianity, there's a set of practices that some Christians will follow. Again, I'm thinking about the Church of England versus the Catholic Church historically. And they said, we're redefining what is allowed and what is kashrut for the way that we want to view the,
But this is different.
So
What I propose is that there's the very essence of the reason that we've always been told to do things, do it or you'll be punished. Whether you individually will be punished or your people will be punished, but somebody will be punished if you don't do it. Now you say.
but every religion has that. Maybe
But
not
now
every,
you're sick, but
not
now
every,
you're
but many
saying,
religions.
now you're saying, there's no supernatural being. You're going
So-
to do this because you're a spiritual person, so why would, what
I want to hear some more responses. I have a response too. Let's do Allison, Eduardo, and Jane. What would you say to
I would say that people, these are everything, nobody in this room, I think, probably follows the Torah to the letter. We pick and choose.
nobody anywhere follows the Torah?
Right, we pick and choose the things that work for us and the things that don't. And it's not because I don't think in the heart of hearts that most people are who keep kosher because they think they're gonna be smoted or smited or smote, whatever the, right? Like, I don't think that they think that they're gonna be struck down. But I think that it's a choice. It's a choice that is an act that brings you closer to a feeling of connection to something bigger. And I think that, I use my daughter for everything. She's brilliant and she asks really good questions. She's having a hard time in 3rd grade right now because the kids are mean. And she is not a mean person. And she doesn't understand it. And she said to me, Mom, I was thinking about it. I could hurt people. I could do whatever I want to them. I don't, because it's the right thing. It's not the right thing to do. And I choose to do the right thing. And I think she just turned 9. Like, I feel like I'm done, go to college.
Let's switch roles, right?
But I think that like, these are all, it's options that you can choose of practices that can give you a connection to something bigger than yourself. It doesn't have to be mandated to be meaningful.
Good. Let's hear a couple more voices. Go ahead, Lana.
I think that I agree with you. I think our opinions are very close together in that. I don't think that, first of all, you said that like without this, you're saying that because we don't believe in the divine punishment, we don't believe in the God of the Torah. It's not the same thing. We can, there's a lot of reasons why one can participate in ritual without needing punishment. And God doesn't have to punish to exist, which is what I feel like you're saying. And there doesn't need to be reward or punishment in that same way. I do what?
If you remember my answer that I gave to Robert, very similar to your answer, but the follow-up question, I guess I'm really trying to get at it. What then? How do you define what the Jewish is as opposed to anything else?
I mean, it's a decision. It is at the end of the day a decision and a conversation amongst various communities. There are going to be a lot of communities that say that we're not Jewish because we're having this conversation. And we can either accept their authority or we don't. And I'm gonna probably assume that we don't accept that authority. That being said, I also do believe in the weight of history, in that it's enough that a tradition has been followed for long enough to say that, okay, I need a reason to stop doing this rather than I need a reason to do this. And the reason doesn't have to be good. Like, I'll eat a cheeseburger because I don't think that the reason not to is fun. But I want to say the prayers, I want to light the candles, I want to participate in these rituals because I know that people have been participating in this ritual for thousands of years. And if you believe in a non-dualistic God and that God is everywhere, and then I think that like there is nothing more sacred than a human life. And people have dedicated their lives to this. And I think that enough is worth honoring.
Good, Jane.
Did I miss something? Wasn't the question, why do we do this? And I'm thinking the Sahara, the same thing that you told us years ago about good and bad. And
Yes, so
it's always guided by somebody above telling us this is what we should do. But our own internal self telling us, like your daughter, telling us this is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that's not part of what guides us.
So yes, so what Jane is saying is your Yetzer Hara, your Yetzer HaTov, you've got a good inclination and an evil inclination. Why don't you hurt people? Because your good inclination is slightly stronger than your bad inclination, so you don't, but you thought it, so it's there. So where does the sense of what's right and wrong come from? Go ahead.
Some of you know my belief in God is that God is man-made. At some point at the very beginning, we realized humbly that we don't have all the answers and we need somebody bigger than us, somebody, ethereal, to guide us. with that said, I think Judaism is everybody has a different form of Judaism. For some people, it's ritual. For some people, it's the practices of the Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox. I think you find your own way. I think one of the beauties of Reform Judaism is that there is this quilt of diverse thinking that everybody comes to it in their own way. So whether you're spiritual,
Yeah.
and that helps you, or whether you're somebody who needs structure in your life and you want rules to follow. And then there are people, and then
Mhm.
I don't know if that helps.
Well, hold on one second. I'm just going to point out. So here's one of many slides. I'm not going to show them all to you because then you won't come to my next conversation. But actually, I'm going to show you two different things.
And they are.
I haven't
You haven't.
announced them
Oh,
yet, no.
okay.
So I'm going to show you a funny slide after this. But basically, dividing ourselves up, we've got about 38% of the congregation who, when asked, do you believe in God, says yes. And about 14% who say no. And 11% who say oh. And then 37% who say yes, but I don't want to stop with just saying, yes, I believe in God and let you define what that means. I want to tell you what I mean when I say yes. And I thought that was just a really interesting slide. And I'll just show you this other one as well. When I asked them basically, well, what is God? What do you think about God? This was the one about the big toe. So this top line is people who didn't believe in God. But then you've got 58 of the people who responded who found God to be a non-dual energy. It wasn't interested in a conscience or conscious, I guess I should say, who is aware of you. The next one was the largest of the section for our congregation. 72 people said, I believe in a personal God. In some form or other, they said this. In other words, when I pray, there's a God who hears me, who knows me. And then 46 people believed what I call the biblical God. In other words, they believe God does stuff. So the typhoon that just hit Guam, God, and maybe not even that extreme. I lumped them in here if they felt like I pray to God because my loved one is sick and God makes my loved one better. So if they responded in that sort of way, I put them into this category of a biblical kind of God, a God who does stuff. And then there was a small group who believes in the physicality of God, believes that God is someplace, can be located, is not ethereal or non-corporeal. And I thought these were really interesting responses.
That doesn't sound like a Reform thing.
Was it you who said it?
Yeah.
That we're not defined, as Reformed Jews, we're not defined by what we are expected to believe. So kinda, on the other hand, a Reformed Jew gets to feel exactly that. I wonder if I can real quickly show you the one that I wanted to. Yeah, so this is actually pretty funny. So here's the back end of the survey. So here are the responses. So this is the actual first question. Do you believe in God? Here's the 38% who said yes. Here's the 14% who said no. Here's I basically had to then go through and read. Here's the not sure. But all of these had different qualifications, and I just thought it was so funny. I had there are eight pages here of answers of how people responded, and it meant I had to go through and just code them all. It was so interesting. No, it was so interesting. So Mike, back to your question. I think there are a lot of reasons why someone would behave well. I think it could be pragmatic, that it actually serves me well. If I work for the betterment of everybody, I benefit. It could be a sense of mortally defined ethics. My parents taught me what's right and wrong. So I'm going to do what's right and wrong, whether it comes because God on Mount Sinai told us to or not. I know what's right and wrong, so I'm going to do what's right. it could come from a place of humility. And that's where I am these days. The non-duality of my spirituality means I am no more holy than anything else. And so once I realize my place, I feel like I've got this incredible opportunity. An ant can't do a whole lot to make the world better. I can make his, her, their life better. So I find myself wanting to. So I do not think that a belief in a supernatural or even a natural God is necessary to lead to right behavior.
And from where I'm not challenging anything at all. I ask the questions because I think we have to, and that's why we're doing the survey. But at the end of the day, having an answer. If you don't have an answer, then how do you attract people to stay here going forward?
The second question you asked, I think, is so interesting. It's like, then what makes, if we don't do the things, then what makes us Jewish and not just like
Good people.
Yeah, and it's actually a question I've been thinking about that a lot.
Holding them survey before we're done here. Go ahead.
Thinking about that same question a lot is if you remove the idea of the biblical God. Yeah, I mean, because I think I told you, I said to my bonus on my color about the idea of the bowl is the space, but it's also the space. And she said, well, that's Buddhism. And it's just interesting where the lines blur and then how do you differentiate?
Yeah.
We're used to hearing this from Mark Olive, but he had a very convenient definition. He said Judaism is a peoplehood. And we're collected through time, through space, perhaps organically through family, perhaps through practice, even if I never met you, but we're practicing the same thing, perhaps through belief system. And from a sociological answer, which maybe isn't very precise, but at least it doesn't answer your question of why is it that we do it. But it does answer who is a Jew.
What's nice about that answer and your question
did I say correct? I mean, that's kind of how we used to define it.
Is once you get to that place of right behavior, using whatever system or school got you there.
That means that your behavior is wrong. I'm right and you're wrong.
Well, that's tough. Yeah,
and that can be a judgmental thing.
It absolutely can. But once you get to that level of spirituality, the boundaries become a lot less significant. So you start to feel like the good Christians and the good Muslims and the good Buddhists and the good Jews, they're all understanding something about the universe. And I'm talking about mystics. I'm not talking about just good people. But mystics can talk the same language and really, connect in that way.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll correct what I'm saying, but my understanding of history of the geographic area we come from is that until the Israelites, the Pharaoh was the king, and it was the Israelites that conceived of the concept of a God being above all people, and where it's a God of moral behavior, not a God of sun, make my flowers grow, wind. I find that so powerful. And if my ancestry goes back to that group,
Great.
it's a group I'm feel very good about. I don't need to go and explore what's happening from India or East Asia. And it's just a very powerful thing to think that morality is what should drive. And then, of course, all the things we know about it. The stranger, the widow, leaving a portion of your field. I mean, if that's where my heritage goes back to.
Before I respond to that, Dennis, would you get the cheesecake out, please? Because no one's eating cheesecake, and we got to eat cheesecake. Shelly's going to kill me. I just wanted to show you this as well. when I asked the congregation, can you describe any of the beliefs, practices, or teachings that you've found particularly valuable coming from Judaism? And people can choose more than one here. Caring for others, right up there at the top. One of the, probably the most common, the neck and neck leader. Oh yeah, look at here, there's 58 people said caring for others, 59 people said ethical teachings. And then we have people who found marking time with ritual, or the importance of community, or tradition, or personal growth to all be important as well. But caring for others and ethical teachings, that's at the core of a lot of folks' sense of what Judaism teaches.
Wouldn't any questionnaire to any religious group come up with the same answer?
You know, in some way, oh, I'm sure you're right. But I wanted people to articulate it for themselves. You know, there's as much importance as getting people to sit back and say, oh, you know, and getting people to say it. But yeah, I would hope so.
Right.
Yeah, Connie, I'll be able.
Going back to, I guess it was my, can we reach, can we reach a consensus that, I think everybody is born good. And then
So everyone's born.
everybody.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing.
We made everybody.
I've heard about that.
That's what she said. She's not asking
Yeah.
me.
Right.
And then how do we get there? I mean, then there are
No.
influences in our lives that corrupt us. And we all have a certain boundaries that will cross, whether we, you know, free choice, free will, or.
Yeah,
I mean-
and all kinds of external causes lead us into that space of fear and selfishness.
It's everybody, that we're all good, and that everybody's all good.
Mark?
Yeah, I think everyone believes.
I don't think the science is either, because I think like sociopathic brains have been demonstrated to exist.
Could have been so much worse.
If I'm grabbing from the cheese,
It could have been so much worse. It could have been red wine.
Kelly's not here.
It didn't exist if you didn't.
Right.
Nobody may not be born evil, but they might be born clumsy.
So the question is,
You
if a,
know,
bottle, if a bottle of wine tips over in the study, Kelly's not here to hear it. Did it happen? The bottle fall. Anybody want to take us in a different direction? Yeah.
The concept of non-duality. So is there any connection? Sorry.
your job.
Connection with the concept of is the pain, which is empty, which I don't believe is. It's empty, I think.
It'll evaporate.
Mike has.
Sure. Yes, very much so. And some of the book that we're using for the podcast addresses that.
Yeah.
And it has to do with so Leslie, yeah, I would say it simply this way, that you know something thanks to its complement.
Yeah, sure.
So we understand Shabbat because of the rest of the days of the week. We understand heat because of cold. So if we were going to say that heat is a thing, cold is the absence of that thing, you still need cold to understand what heat is. If black are all the colors all mixed together, and white is the absence of color, which I think is striking.
Black is the absence of light.
Ah.
White is the absence of.
Okay, well, okay, so somehow that works in sure.
Colors mixed together make.
So, I mean,
In pigments.
physicists are telling us now that there is no empty space. But what we've experienced as emptiness complements the material. And so, in simplest terms, you would say perhaps there's something under my finger in the form of a table. Right above it, now there's nothing here where my fingers are. Forget about the air. There's nothing here. Okay, so non-duality says, okay, but those two realities are still a part of the whole. So non-duality requires ain, the absence, to complement the yesh, the presence. Did that make
Yeah.
sense?
Thank you. I have a question. We have instruction on how to behave in terms of not doing what's hateful to ourselves, not doing it to others, but we also have the imperative of taking action. It's not for us to complete the task, nor is it us to not try. So with non-duality, I can see that if you are in a space where you feel connected, how you would accomplish the first part of not doing something hateful. But how do you get to the second part of being active? And you need to do something to help you and not just enjoy the feeling of being connected.
Well, it depends on the non-dualist, but generally the teaching would include the idea that God, as the universe, has manifest in such a way that a big bang turned into a planet surrounding a star. The conditions were right for the emergence of life, which evolved over a couple billion years into this, us sitting around the table. And every step along the way, there are capabilities. Our capabilities allow for us to do stuff, to act, to work. And so for us to be fully engaged and actualized, we should be doing what we are, get ready for it, created to do. We've been created through a natural selection, a natural set of evolution, and the current capabilities of humanity allow for us to do a great deal. If we were not to do that, it would be a shame. That's all.
Is that the same thing as the purpose of life?
Again, it depends on who you ask, but I really like Jay Michelson and Art Green's answer on that, which is the purpose of life is to know the truth of what I just said. When you have the ability to realize that in the midst of your commute back and forth to work every day and the grind of raising children and the hopes and dreams and desires and material pursuits and all of that, above all of that, beyond all of that, it's all encompassed in a greater reality. And whether or not you pause and appreciate that, it's still there. When you do pause to appreciate it, you are realizing your purpose in life, because that realization will then lead you to right acts, greater empathy, a sense of commandedness, if you're comfortable with the term. But it's, there's a lot of nuance to that word commandedness when I say it.
So that takes me right back to the sense of spirituality.
Yeah. So if you're a bean counter and that's your job, count those beans with a sense of presence. Be really alive in it.
So I picked up what you said in slightly different phrasing, okay? Which is that the community, the alter sense to say, in the absence of the thing is supreme being, there's no miracle. The response to that is, the fact that that everything exists the way it is every bit a miracle.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the probabilities of each thing that led to it, it's infinitesimal
Yeah.
that you get to this. And if once you say it's a miracle, then
The problem is miracle is often defined as something supernatural.
well, that's right. But
And Einstein's great quote, right? Either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. Yeah, and he's saying exactly the same thing you are, Mike, that once you start to really look at the universe, you realize it's all a miracle.
and you want to, therefore, you want to do something back.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
Well,
But the only thing like that is this, still when you define spirituality as requiring an aha moment, and I'm like, you can be spiritual without an aha moment.
Yeah.
I defined it as having the ability and acting on the ability to differ between what you consider holy and not holy. And that is, because that's a uniquely human thing.
the only thing I'll take issue with was I think you took my words a step further than I actually uttered them. I don't think I said that you have to have an aha moment. I said, I think that everyone here knows what that moment feels like because we've all had aha moments. Aha moments are usually attached to spirituality, our spirituality, but they're not the only spirituality. Because we know what that feels like, we also know what it's like to sit quietly and look out the window. And to have, yeah, aha moment. Oh, that's nice. To do nothing and or to do something, but to really be in it. Those are related to aha moments and ah moments. That's good.
Yes.
So I had a really interesting conversation with my spiritual director, who listened to a couple of episodes of the podcast and said, I have an issue with how you open. You say it's a place for people to explore their spirituality without sacrificing their rationality. He said, that's not possible. He said, for you to have spirituality, you are by definition stepping aside from rationality. And he's not wrong, but what we're doing here is considering spirituality. We're thinking about it. We're actively engaged. If we're going to have a spiritual experience, we're not going to be thinking about it. We're going to be in it. The moment you stop and say, wow, that was a cool experience, the spiritual experience is over. And you're now back in your skin, you're back in your brain, you're thinking it over. You might try to recapture it. And so the podcast is not meant to be a spiritual experience. The podcast is meant to be fodder for consideration, which might make people more comfortable with putting their experiences in the framework of Jewish teaching.
It's also a toolbox. I mean, I think that we talked about this a little bit the last time we were together. I think that what we're doing here and the process of what I find myself doing in this class and after this class is actually being quite present in a way that I am not often in a lot of other parts of my life, because I'm, there are 25 things on my work to-do list, and I've got people calling me, and my kid is there, and something's the matter. And that the moment of taking an idea and turning it over and over and over and inspecting it, maybe that's not spiritual, but it certainly gets you closer. It's a path to get you there.
And maybe I would even revise what I said a moment ago. If you're really present here and you're not thinking about other stuff, maybe it is on the spectrum of spirituality. I'll give it right back to you.
You said it very well. If you're really present, especially if you're not the one talking, but you're listening, and you feel very present and connected to the people here, you have moments of a spiritual experience.
Under your definition, a moment can be spiritual for a person.
Yeah, that's probably true. And yet most people think of themselves in comparison to others who they see unappreciative of moments. And so they would describe themselves as a spiritual person. But listen, I'm still here. Go ahead.
I do see your point. Yes, a moment can be spiritual, but under how I view spirituality, I absolutely say I am a very spiritual person in the sense of the dialogue I have with myself. If it's me talking to me, then it's just me that can be spiritual.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
That's not quite, they're different, it's almost like there's different definitions for different purposes.
I think spirituality is subjective work. It can be defined in so many ways, and lastly, you brought up a great point too of there are just as many ways of being Jewish as there are Jews. Judaism in and of itself is up to each person's development. Okay? This has every person with their own spirituality. You brought up the example of kashrut. I keep kosher. My kitchen is completely kosher. I love it. I also believe in God. This might be heresy, but I think we're all okay with that idea at this point. My relationship with kashrut has so much less to do with my relationship with God than it does my relationship with the Jewish people. I don't keep kosher because I think God's gonna smack me if I eat bacon. I keep kosher because that's what
You're gonna find.
thousands of years of people have done before me. That's what my peers do. That's how I relate to this people that I've chosen. It's just as much about my spirituality as it is the peoplehood we talked about. Or yes, in a way, God. I mean, do I think about God every time I say Baruch Atah Adonai? Absolutely. I'm saying God's name. But it goes so much deeper than that. And I think that is also a really key element of spirituality.
Okay, I'm gonna suggest that with a couple minutes left, we can continue after 8:30, but I want to make sure that we do have a closing at that point. So if it's okay, I'm gonna ask Leslie and Connie just to hold on for a moment. In that this is the bookend of a learning experience, there is a Kaddish. Kaddishes happen at significant moments of bookend, usually at transitions in a prayer service or well, obviously ends of lives. This Kaddish is called Kaddish de Rabbanan. Rabbanan is the Aramaic form of rabbis. So this is a Kaddish that's said at the end of a learning chunk. So I thought what we might do is, deliver it in two forms. So first, let's do the traditional. I'm going to invite you, if you're able, to please be upstanding. And Elizabeth, if you want to come closer to the screen to be able to see the words, there's a section you won't know by heart. So everybody, having successfully completed Judaism boot camp, I invite you to join with me as we say, Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, and this is not a sad Kaddish. Be'alma, Divara, Firute, Be'yam lich malchute, Be'chayechon, U'yomechon, U'chaye, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, U'vizman Kariv, Be'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Ul'almei Almaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitaleh V'yithalal Shmei Dekudsha B'richu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushvechata V'nechemata Da'amiram Ve'alma Ve'imru Amen. Al Yisrael Ve'al Rabbanan Ve'al Talmidei Hon Ve'al Kol Talmidei Hon Ve'al Kol Man Da'askin Be'oraita Di Vatra Hadin Ve'di Be'chol Atar Ve'atar Yehe Lehon Ulchon Shlama Rabba Ine Vechista Verachamin Vechayin Arichin Umizone Reviche Uforkana Min Kadam Avuhon Di Vishmaya Ve'imru Amen Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya Vechaim Tovim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. Ose Shalom Mimromav U'Yabrachamav Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael, and we add ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, the imru amen. So now you're wondering, what did he just make me say? So most of it, of course, is known as, to the Kaddish. In English, we just said, may God's great name be exalted and hallowed throughout the created world, as is God's wish. May God's sovereignty soon be established in your lifetime and in your days, and in the days of all the house of Israel. And we say, Amen. May God's great name be acknowledged forever and ever. May the name of the Holy One be acknowledged and celebrated, lauded and worshiped, exalted, honored, extolled, and exclaimed. Though God, who is blessed, B'richu, is truly beyond all acknowledgement and praise, or any expressions of gratitude or consolation ever spoken in the world. And we say, Amen. And here's that big section we added. Grant abundant peace to our people and it should be teachers, to our teachers and their disciples, and to all who engage in the study of Torah in this land and in all other lands. May you and they be blessed by our Creator in heaven with great peace, grace and kindness, compassion and love and long life, abundance and deliverance. And we say, Amen. May heaven bestow on us and on all Israel good life, with abundant and lasting peace. And we say, Amen. May the one who creates peace on high mercifully bring peace to us and to all Israel. And we say, Amen. And actually, the Aramaic is even more beautiful. Here we just said to our teachers and their disciples and to all who engage in the study of Torah. But in the Aramaic, what we actually said was the Al Rabbanan and our teachers, the Al Talmidei Hon and their students, the Al Kol and all the Talmidei Hon and all the students of the students. It's just a really pretty rhythm to it. Be settled, and we'll offer Kaddish Rabbanan in a slightly different.
That was, by the way, the only time I have ever heard the Kaddish said in a way that actually expressing.
Oh, really?
Recited like what I call davening, which is. But that, right, okay, so that was actually very.
Well, that's awesome. So I'm sorry that was the first time. It should have happened long before today.
Once when you did an all English in the 18 summer.
Oh. Did we do this one? Yeah, we would have read it. It's pretty similar. Yeah. So as a closing song for this experience, I invite you to join in Debbie Friedman's rendition of the Kaddish Rabbanan. For our teachers and their students and the students of their students, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say Amen. And for those who study Torah here and everywhere, may they be blessed with all they know. That's scrolling, there we go. And let us pray. Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, we ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, we ask for peace and loving kindness. And let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say, Amen. We ask for peace and
No. I put them.
Where?
The, for end of the first paragraph, end of the second paragraph, end of the
And-
third.
Unless
It's supposed to say less,
And let's
take the T out and add this.
And let's not say.
Yeah. Yeah. On all three paragraphs. Does it help that I tell you that I just copied and pasted it?
No.
And it's funny because it really does reverse the meaning.
Yeah.
Lest we say amen. That's funny. That's really funny. Good catch. I'll fix that slide before someone else sees it. That's for sure. I just want to, I want to finish by saying, and I mean this without hyperbole, and no, I don't say it to every group that I work with. I don't think I've ever had as much fun teaching. I have loved every single session. You are the most engaged, most interesting, smartest group that I have ever had the pleasure to work with. I thank you so deeply for giving me the opportunity to love being a rabbi. This was the best part of my year.
Well, thank you for being the teacher.
Yes.
The amount of work that you put into it, so.
Thank you.
That's saying something. I think you have a very distinct ability to make sure that people on Zoom also feel heard.
Oh, speaking of which, hi Gail.
Rabbi Jay.
Well, everybody, make sure you put a piece of cheesecake in your pocket on the way out. And
What should we do instead?
I was hoping you weren't gonna ask that.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I want to offer something next fall, which is gonna be interesting to you all. I want to make sure that whatever I present is something that if you can't join, it won't be because you think it's not interesting. So I will continue to try to hit the mark, and maybe I'll send out some options to the group and see what floats your boat. Try and offer something that really stimulates the group. What were the limitations to this?
We're doing a performance evaluation?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Letting a social worker in the midst.
I didn't feel there were limitations in any respect.
I'll give you one.
Yeah.
Time,
Yeah,
sometimes time got in the way.
yeah. I'll tell you, there were clearly several sessions where I bit off way too much information. And the group started out taking notes, and then I realized, 2/3 of the way through, nobody was taking notes anymore. And there were some sessions where I just crammed so much into the time. And my thinking was it's going to be a lot, but at least they'll absorb something. Probably some of those nights could have ratcheted way back on the information and gotten some poignant pieces more deeply rather than lots of pieces more shallowly.
More sessions.
And more session. Boy, isn't that the trick? Yeah.
That's right, so it's all
Yeah.
down to time.
So this year,
That's the limitations.
we're changing it for next year, but this year on Thursday nights, we also had our Tikkun Sinai, the shift program that I had to work around. So there were some nights where I was in two places at once, and I kind of cut. Whoa, that's not what the problem was. The problem was I just couldn't actually do more. Exposed to any of us, right? Yeah.
You can't have one foot in each. picture.
Yeah.
Somebody can't do.
That wasn't the limitation, but
All I know to me about being a non-dualist, you couldn't be in two places.
correct. I can barely be in one. That's right. That's right. That's funny. Well played. Well, if there is other feedback, feel free, please, to funnel it back to me, and if it needs to be made anonymous, you can tell Jane and have her give it to me without your name, that's perfectly fine too, but I really enjoyed working with all of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Where do you want the plates?
The plates and glasses can stay right there, I'm gonna take one of them home, that's for sure.
You've got people at home. so-
Oh, I just meant one of them is right here. Good night, Gail.
Good night. I'll be in touch